This is a build that I originally designed for PvP, but it ends up being very good for world versus world roaming because of how the Diviner stats scale very well with it. This is a Soulbeast, normal Longbow Greatsword kind of setup, but it's going for more of like a tanky Boon Beast kind of setup, while also maintaining a lot of crit damage for massive burst and DPS, and you end up getting a lot of synergy between the offensive and defensive traits, rather than going with like a Boon Beast build where it's too defensive and you don't have a lot of damage to make up for that sustain. And it's not like one of those Sikkim builds where you just have no defense at all. So this is a really good build because I found a nice balance between sustain and damage. So it feels really good and rewarding because of the damage of the build, but it also doesn't feel too punishing because you have no play or sustain to allow your skill to become a factor. So let's go over the traits. I have Skirmishing, Beast Mastery, and Soulbeast. In Skirmishing, you'll be taking the Vicious Quarry, which is whenever you have Fury, you gain an extra 10% crit chance, so you have 30% more crit when you have Fury. It's important to have this boon up at all times. And you also have Strider's Defense, which is whenever you evade an attack on a 5-second ICD, you gain quickness. And as you can see here, I have 58% boon duration. I'll have a little bit more with food on. Let me just put that on. And then, yeah, so I have 64%, basically 65% boon duration. So you have 2.5 seconds of quickness every time you dodge, and it's a 5-second ICD, so that's kind of like half uptime if you're evading attack every 5 seconds. And you also have Primal Reflexes, which gives you vigor, and with boon duration, that's 6.5 seconds every 8 seconds. So you can pretty much get these boons very often, and you'll see later with the boon extensions of this build, they'll pretty much be near permanent levels. And then when you swap weapons, you'll also get Fury and Swiftness, and that's not really that important because you'll be getting Fury and Swiftness a lot already. It's basically permanent on this build. But also, when you have Fury up, you'll gain Ferocity, and that'll give you a lot of damage modifiers. So this build with Fury has 240 crit damage, so that's really good. Now, Beast Mastery. The idea of this build is that you're basically merged with your pet pretty permanently. You can leave your pet the merge sometimes if you're in like a situation where you need to cleave a down body but you also need to kite. You can unmerge, leave the pet on the body, and then you can move around. Or if you're in like a 1v1, unmerging is very good as well because single target damage is a lot better when you have a pet out as well. So normally you do want to be merged because, as you can see here, my stats go up really high when you're merged. Now, even though this is a supportive pet, I'm using the Snow Owl. You actually get quite a bit of power and ferocity just being merged with the pet because of just simply the stats. But also, you gain, because it's a supportive pet, you gain vitality and healing power. So you get a lot of sustain, you get a lot of just offensive stats from being merged with your pet. So as you can see here, 206 crit damage, and then I merge, I've got 224. Now that's because of the pack alpha trait, which gives your pets more stats, right? And then you also have the pet's prowess, which gives your pet extra ferocity. So yeah, whenever you merge with the pet, you're going to be gaining a lot of ferocity and power and other stuff. And then also you have honed axes. This is a little bit weird because you're not running any axes, but it still gives you passive ferocity. So you and your pet gain ferocity, period. Your pet gains 120 ferocity, and you gain 120 ferocity, without any axe synergy. And when you're merged with your pet, you gain your pet's ferocity as well. So just from having this trait selected, you can see I go from 224 crit damage to, oh, that's, I have to do it here, 224 to 208. So this trait alone gives like 16% crit damage while merged, and then it'd give half that bonus when you're not merged. So yeah, it's really strong. Also, you have Resounding Timber, which gives you regen and swiftness whenever you use a command, and commands are reduced in recharge. You have 1, 2, 3 commands, so it's nice that they're lowered in cooldown. And you basically have permanent regen and swiftness, which is super important on this build because you have pretty much cover boons for your other more important boons. And then natural healing is whenever you are merged, you'll gain this healing for yourself, but your pet recovers health at 380 every 3 seconds, and that can be increased basically by the supportive buff while merged with the Snow Owl. And basically it amounts to like 130-ish healing per second, and with regen that's pretty much the same amount, so it's like 260 healing per second. And that's really nice with this build because, as I said, you want to have sustain to supplement your damage because you have that Diviner's set. So the thing is with Diviners, it's the same kind of squishiness as Berserker Amulet, and if you're too squishy with a Diviner's build, then you don't survive long enough to gain the bonuses of your boon duration, because boon duration is all about sustained fights. So it is important that you add in sustain to the build, go a little bit more tankier, but because you are that Diviner set with all those boons and damage, yeah, you're gonna still feel like you're well rounded. So natural healing is very good, but you could also go for two-hand training because this trait is actually pretty insane. It gives you a 20% recharge on Greatsword skills, which is pretty good, and a 10% damage on them as well, which is really high, and honestly might have some nerfs that it might need, because that's like really high modifier just for doing nothing. Anyways, next in Soulbeast, you'll have Live Fast, which gives you quickness and fury whenever you use a beast skill, which is basically your F3. That's kind of nice because of the Essence of Speed trait, which is whenever you gain quickness, the duration of other boons affecting you is extended by 2 seconds on a 5-second ICD. So whenever you use your F3, you'll gain resistance and quickness. So because I have 64% boon duration, that's a 5 seconds of resistance. But because I also gain quickness at the same time, the ordering of it extends it to, yeah, as you can see here, the tooltip went down to 5 seconds after I had already used it, but there's like a delay, so it was like 7 seconds there. So yeah, that's a really nice long duration resistance, because basically this build has no Condi cleanse except for the cleansing sigil on the Greatsword. So how you actually make up for the Condi cleanse lacking of this build, because you don't have wilderness survival, is you use resistance with boon duration and boon extension traits. So I have the Rune of the Revenant, and we'll talk about that later, but that gives resistance. So you have resistance from 2 sources, and then you have a lot of boon extensions with We Heal as 1, and just quickness giving you extension of 2 seconds every 5 seconds. So yeah, it's a lot of resistance, and let's just actually show the resistance uptime here. So I'll just use this, gives me quickness, I'll extend the boon, and then you've got 10 seconds of resistance there, and then I can get quickness again for even longer. By the time it's even lower, I could gain quickness again, and yeah, it's a lot of resistance. So if you time that well, you can basically shrug off blinds from thieves, and you can ignore weakness, chill, but you do have to be careful with this build. I know what you're thinking, right? This build gets hard countered by Boon Rip, and that's very true. And if you go against a Condi Necro, those are probably the hardest things for you to fight, because not only do they do conditions to you, which you don't have any Condi cleanse, but they can remove your resistance at the same time. So you do have the cleansing sigil there on the Greatsword, because even though you do have the resistance, yeah, you're going to need to remove some conditions sometimes. And pretty much versus anything else, you can just use your sustain from your healing and stuff like that, or just simply use range and disengage to survive condition classes that have Boon Rip on them, right? So Condi Revs and Condi Necros, you actually don't really have a problem with them, because the Condi Necros can't really get close to you, and the Condi Revs kind of have the same issue, right? They're a very slow class, so that is kind of nice. And yeah, you also do 5% more damage for 10 seconds whenever you disable a foe. That's kind of nice with point blank shot, because you can disable someone at range, get that 5% extra damage, and then go into your rapid fire for more DPS. So that's good. Next is oppressive superiority. So whenever you are at a higher health percentage than your target, so right now this golem is at 40% HP, it might be higher health than me because it has like maybe like 100,000 health, but I have 20,000 health. Even though it's probably higher health than me right now, it's the health percentage that matters. So I'm at 100%, it's at 49. I'll get the damage bonus of 10%. And this is better than Leader of the Pack, because Moa Stance doesn't really need an extended duration. Even though it could be nice, I like the damage increase of oppressive superiority. So yeah, those are pretty much the traits. As you can see, all the boon extension results in a lot of boons. So as you can see here, I have Moa Stance, and that'll give you 4 boons. So regen, swiftness, fury, protection, those are going to be high uptime on this build. So let's go over the equipment real quick to sort of understand where the boons come from, right? So I have full diviners on my trinkets. Now diviners gives you basically the same thing as Marauders, except less precision. So Marauders gives main stats power and precision, and then minor stats ferocity and vitality. With diviners, you gain main stat power and concentration. So it's the same kind of like squishiness as Zerker, because it gives no survivability other than boon duration. Obviously that is survivability in a way, but the tankiness isn't there, right? The vitality, you gotta get that somewhere else. So I use full Marauder's gear. I think there's a Zerker piece in there, but you should use full Marauder's gear so that you get a little bit of vitality. You'll also get some vitality with your merge from the supportive pet archetype, and that'll give you up to like 20,000 HP, which is kind of nice. For it gives you enough survivability, and you'll feel very tanky because you have almost permanent prot uptime, which reduces physical damage by 33%, and you'll have resistance uptime as well, which kind of covers both bases, right? It has the sustain versus both damage types. So I have, the full Marauder's gear, or you should have the full Marauder's gear, and then Diviner's weapons and trinkets, because that'll give you around 64-ish% boon duration with the food, and that's kind of like the sweet spot, right? It's not too squishy, but it also gives you enough of that synergy with the boon duration. And because of all that boon duration, it makes all of the boons that you're getting just last so much longer. And the longer that they last is the more chances you have to proc Essence of Speed on them and keep them going. So the boon duration kind of scales with itself, right? Because the more boons you have, the more boons you're going to be extending, right? If they fall off or get corrupted or something, you're not extending them anymore. You got to reapply them. So yeah, boon duration is really nice. I also have cleansing and agility sigil on my greatsword. So whenever I swap to greatsword, I gain 1 second of quickness, which is basically there for proccing Essence of Speed. The 1 second isn't really that good, but it'll go up to like 1.5 seconds because of boon duration. Then I also have air and rage sigil on my bow, and rage sigil is really nice because all you have to do is crit and it gives you quickness. So if I just start rapid firing right here, I didn't actually crit for a while there because I didn't have Fury, but yeah, if I had Fury, which you pretty much always have, you'll get that extra 30% crit chance, and I'd have 80% crit chance there. But yeah, as soon as you use rapid fire, you'll pretty much gain quickness immediately, and that'll make your rapid fire deal pretty much quickness levels of damage, right? And you get that, it does around like 10k on a decently healthy target, and it does a lot of burst because of the quickness uptime on this build. And obviously how this build kind of works is you pop your boons and then you immediately rapid fire, and the rapid fire will proc your quickness from the rage sigil, and that's immediately extending the boons from Essence of Speed. So it's not so much the uptime of the quickness that is important to you, but more the application and the timing of the application of it to kind of fit in between those ICDs as neatly as possible. And when you swap into the greatsword, it's also kind of nice that you get that cleansing because yeah, that's usually want to like kite when you go into the greatsword. So the timing of that is really nice as well. And the agility kind of gives you that boon duration you need to sort of get more resistance if you're in that kiting situation too. And then lastly, the Revenant rune. So Revenant rune gives you just basically all stats, which is nice because you're kind of going for this all-rounder kind of build. So all the stats are kind of relevant to you except maybe condition damage and expertise. And also, your 6 bonus is gain 2 seconds of resistance after using a heal skill. And because of boon duration, that actually goes up to 3 seconds of resistance whenever you use your heal skill. And yeah, that's kind of like the best way for you to gain sustain, because resistance not only shrugs off conditions, but it also gives you immunity to a lot of other debilitating conditions, as I mentioned before, like blind, weakness, chill, cripple. Yeah, that's the traits and the equipment. The food that you want to use is actually the soul pastries. And these are really good because, yeah, they're not really like ascended level of food, but if I try to buy them on the trading post, you'll see they're 24 copper each. So yeah, buy them while they are low. I'm pretty sure they're going to stay low though, even though I'm basically telling a lot of people to buy them because you get them from Halloween in the trick-or-treat bags, so it's just so easy to get them. But they give 100 concentration and 70 power, which is basically all the stats that you want. So yeah, the concentration is really good, the power is really good, and those are like max level, right? You're not going to get more of those stats from anything else. So it's very cheap, pretty budget option, but also premium budget. And then I also use the Furious Sharpening Stones, which just give you power equal to your precision and ferocity equal to your precision. So the skills for this build are the Longbow Greatsword, and your auto attack does more damage the further you are from the target, and it's actually a pretty hard hitting skill. So that's really nice, especially when you have quickness. you're going to be hitting very fast and very hard. Rapid fire is your main damage source. You can just see how large that damage is, 2,700 from a 2.5 second cast from really long range. Like the benefit of Longbow is that you just have so much range on it. Like the damage is pretty okay on Longbow, but it's the fact that you have so much range on it that it just makes you so safe. So like you just rapid fire from really far away. And how the projectiles work on like bows and stuff is that they kind of arc, so they're actually longer range than they actually say they are. Like it's 1500 range, but that's not 1500 range, that's longer than 1500. So yeah, it's just such a long range skill that you're kind of able to use it defensively because you can have the better positioning. And a lot of people actually play Ranger too safely, but yeah, that's because they don't have the right build, and they just have no sustain. But you have Hunter Shot, which gives your pet swiftness. Because you're merged, you'll gain that swiftness, but that's not really that important. What's really important is that you gain stealth on this, and it's just kind of nice for disengaging tool. If you use this and then say you're getting chased, you can like turn around, hit them with the stealth, and then run through them and juke them like that, or swap to your Greatsword and immediately swoop away. It's also a physical projectile, which can be nice because you're using the owl, but you also have the smoke scale, and you'll be using the smoke scale sometimes too, but we'll talk about the pet in a bit. But basically, the smoke scale gives you a smoke field, and you can use Hunter Shot as a physical projectile to blind foes. So that's kind of nice. And yeah, there you get the blind. So next is Point Blank Shot. So this knocks back foes at a range of 100 to 600 distance, and that depends on the distance that your foe is to you. So the closer they are, the further it pushes them back. So you want to kind of not just spam Point Blank Shot at max range unless you're trying to interrupt something. You want to wait till they get closer. So I like to use auto attacks and rapid fire until I see the enemy start to react to me, and then I'll try to disrupt them or create a distance using Point Blank Shot. What a lot of rangers do is they just spam Point Blank Shot off cooldown, and it's not really that effective because the timing of the Point Blank Shot can be very disruptive. So yeah, I like to save that until they get closer or to interrupt something, but yeah, it's just a pretty good skill, and it's also a 100% physical projectile, so you can use that to blind with your smoke scale field. Next is Barrage. Barrage is probably one of the most broken skills in the game. As you can see here, it does 4,400 damage over time, but it takes a while for that to kind of ramp up. So what you do is you stand still while casting Barrage, and it just creates a massive area of damage that hits up to 5 targets each, and it just ticks there for a really long time. So it's mostly good for cleaving downstate bodies, and you'll also have the ability to like cast this on yourself when you go into stealth. So like say you're fighting someone and you want to go in stealth, the best thing to use while in stealth is something that has a little bit of you kind of like peel for yourself when you're in stealth, right? So you can sort of cast the Barrage, and by the time the Barrage starts ticking, you've already got most of the cast out. So you can like Barrage on yourself, and if they try to attack you while you're revealed from your stealth, you've got that Barrage to kind of peel for you, and you can trade with them much more easily because you have the Barrage ticking already. So it's sort of like a you can stack the Barrage on top of your other damage, so if people try to play aggressively on you, you have a lot of counter pressure. Also, Barrage is really interesting in that the skill actually doesn't require any line of sight. So if I'm like right here, I have no line of sight, but I can still cast it in any location. And that's because there is no, like the only limitation to the skill is the range. So as long as you're within 1500 range, you can cast it anywhere. And you have to be very intelligent with the skill because of that. So you want to get, because in a way, line of sight does affect the skill, right? Because if you can't see the place that you're trying to barrage, well, then you can't click there to cast it there. So you kind of have to like do camera angles and stuff. And there is a little bit of a trick you can do where if you don't have sight on the area you want to cast it on, you can actually go into your options, and what you can do is you enable it really quickly and enable snap ground target to current target. And then what you do is you target something, and say I have like no line of sight on them, but I could sort of see them beforehand and I get the target at least, or maybe I targeted them beforehand and I can take the target. I can just cast 5, and now you can see I'm casting barrage on them. So that's a really neat trick that you can enable and disable when you want to do that. And yeah, generally you don't want to have that enabled because you want to be able to cast your barrage in strategic locations, not just on the target, but in certain spaces where you can predict the target to be, or on top of yourself. So yeah, usually you don't want to enable that, but otherwise you can use it for those very fringe situations where a target is maybe like an Ellie that misforms into their gate, and you can actually cleave them while they're inside the tower or something like that. So yeah, those are the longbow skills. And you have your greatsword as well. So the auto attack is not really that strong. It's kind of okay. The final attack gives you endurance, which is kind of okay. But the maul is where you get most of your damage. So maul basically gives you a decent chunk of damage. It'll give you an attack of opportunity. So basically it gives it to your pet, but since you are merged with the pet, you will gain it. And what it does is it gives you 25% damage on your next single hit. So it's really good with swoop because your other greatsword skills don't really do any damage. Or you can use it with worldly impact. So you'll do like your maul into worldly impact, and then from there you'll use your hilt bash. And what hilt bash does is it's a daze if you hit from the front of your target, and it's a stun if you hit from the back of your target. And if it lands, it'll recharge your maul. So maul's a 6-second cooldown, which is already really short, but in burst combos that it's important to get that recharge. So you can do something like maul, and then with the attack of opportunity you swoop, and then hilt bash, and then another maul. So that doesn't really waste your attack of opportunity on like a 11 damage skill. Or yeah, so swoop basically is a pretty decent hitting skill with a long kind of range leap, and there's an evade on the second. There's like 2 portions of the skill, so you kind of like leap forward, and then you do like this sort of like leaping evade, which is also a leap finisher. So leap, and now you do the leap finisher, and that's kind of nice for your smoke scale. So the smoke scale, when it's not merged with you, will put down a smoke field, and then you put that down, and then you want to leap through it. The second half needs to go through the smoke field there. So yeah, you gotta know when to use that to disengage from outnumbered situations. And also you have your counterattack. Counterattack is a 3-second block, which is really strong because it doesn't block a single attack. It blocks every attack that hits you within that time. And if you do block something with that, you can then counterattack with a sort of knockback attack that doesn't do damage, but it's nice because it's an evade as well. So yeah, it's just a really long block into an evade, so it's just a lot of uptime of defense there. And as I mentioned on this build before, you have lots of boons, and an evade on the Greatsword 3 and the Greatsword 4 adds to your Strider's defense and your primal reflexes uptimes. So you have a lot of boon extension from evasion and the Greatsword set. Also, you have the agility sigil on your Greatsword, so you get more essence of speed there as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the Greatsword and Longbow skills. While you're merged, so you have two different merges. You can either merge with your smoke scale, and you cannot swap your pet while you're in combat, so you kind of have to premeditate what kind of situation you're going to be in. Smoke scale is better for like 1v1s and focusing down targets in like a aggressive situation where maybe you're like 3v1ing, but in more like 1v1 against like Condi classes or outnumbered situations, you'd want to be on the bird. So smoke scale is very good though, but I feel that the bird is useful in more situations because the smoke scale can only kind of like engage with targets, whereas the bird can engage and disengage, because you'll see the ability soon. But basically you have the 2-second knockdown with the smoke scale, which is really strong for comboing with the maul. So you can do like takedown, which will give you twice as vicious, into maul, and then from there you can hilt bash or swoop, and then do another maul. And then you also have smoke assault, which is sort of like the Revenant sword 3 ability, but it's way longer range. It's 750 range, and you port in and you evade attacks while you're doing it, and you're gaining might as well from every hit that you do. And the might is really good because you can extend the duration of that might. I didn't really do it at the right time there, but yeah, extending the duration is kind of nice. And it's just nice because it's an evade with basically no cast time, so you can react to certain spells very quickly with this. So it's a really good skill. And then Worldly Impact obviously just has a really high modifier, and it does a lot of damage for cleaving down bodies, and will give you quickness, so you can combo that with a lot of other skills. Let's go to the Snow Owl. So you have to get out of combat to swap your pet, because Soulbeast has a trade-off of only being able to use one pet while in combat. But with the Owl, you gain a 1200 range leap, which is a combo finisher, so you can't really use that with the smoke scale field unless you are out of combat. So actually you can do something like the fight's about to start, and what you'll do is you'll do the smoke scale, and then you can like do a leap through it with your greatsword, and then you can swap pet and then merge, and then use the owl leap through it for the second stealth, but you have to be out of combat to swap your pet. So it's like a precast kind of thing. And then your F2 just gives quickness to nearby allies. Not too important because you already have perma quickness or swiftness. And then your heal skill is a 4000 heal, which is really nice. Gives you a lot of sustain, and it gives you that 5 seconds of resistance. So yeah, that's mainly why I use Owl, for the mobility and just being able to just be so quick and disengage. Also does a decent amount of damage on this skill, but yeah, the healing and resistance is super important because you have no Condi cleanse on this build. So generally you pretty much will be on the Owl, just because you don't ever know when you're going to be against a Condi build, or just in general, like larger fights will always have Condis. So yeah, the Owl, definitely want to be on that. So your skills are, for the heal skill, you will use We Heal as 1. Your pet and yourself gain copies of each other's boons, but since you are your pet, basically, you just copy your own boons. And yeah, so if I go into all of my boons here, I'll gain quickness. I just extend the boons here. You know, they have set kind of durations of each boon that you'll increase. So you have, you can see in the tooltip right here, all the durations of the boons. So if you have any of those boons on you, you'll basically gain that boon for the duration listed here. So if I have 70 seconds of swiftness, it'll copy 5 seconds of swiftness onto it. If I have, 2 seconds of resistance, it'll give 3.5 or 3.25, it says, seconds of resistance. So it doesn't really matter what your current duration is, it'll just extend it by this amount. But if you give yourself quickness, it'll extend it by 2 seconds. So if you already have quickness on you, it'll give you all of these boons, and then it'll give you quickness again, which will give you 2 seconds of essence of speed. But there's really not that much synergy there, because if you have quickness on yourself, then you've probably already procced the essence of speed. So yeah, the quickness doesn't really synergize with itself too well because it already procs the essence of speed trait. So as you can see here, I use the quickness and then I use the heal, and it does copy the quickness, but it doesn't essence of speed it again. So you kind of have to have really long boon durations for the quickness to start self-synergizing, because you'd have to proc the essence of speed with the first quickness, and then you'd need it to last long enough for the essence of speed to proc again on that same stack of quickness. So the more boon duration you have, as I mentioned earlier, the more synergy you have. And so you'll have your heal skill will do a decent amount of sustain for yourself. Another important thing to mention with this skill is that you have, if you look at the durations of all of them, the highest duration is might, and you actually don't really get might in too many ways on this build, except from, as I said, the smoke skill, which only give 5, but your strength of the pack elite. So strength of the pack grants might to your pet when you attack, but since you're your pet, you gain the might. So it's best to pretty much use strength of the pack with your longbow. So every time you hit, it'll give you 1 might for 6 seconds maybe, and that's affected by boon duration. And there's no ICD on that, so it's really good on longbow where you can do multiple hits with, say, barrage. And as you can see here, I use barrage into rapid fire, and I'm at 20-ish, might, and I can use my heal now, and that duration went up to 15, so I have 25 might for a really long time there. So that adds to your burst damage, and then obviously you can use quickness to extend the duration of the might, and yeah, you just gain a ton of damage because of that. And it's proccing more here, and I can extend the duration with the essence of speed. And if you extend the duration long enough, you can make it last until your next We Heal is 1, which would increase the duration another 15 or 16 seconds. So yeah, it's really good. That's why I take strength of the pack as the elite. And you also gain 10 seconds of stability for 10 stacks. So yeah, just more opportunities for you to extend the boons that you have. So MOA Stance gives you pretty much a 10-second 20% boon duration. So it gives you even more boon duration, and it doesn't really say here that it gives it, but it gives it on the stance there. And it also gives you protection, fury, swiftness, and regen. The only boons that are really important there are fury and protection. Now you have pretty much permanent fury, but there's really no way for you to gain fury at the start of a fight, because you only really get fury from strength of the pack, which is good, but you're not going to always use that at the start of a fight. You sometimes want to save the stability. You also will only get fury from your spiritual reprieve, which is a heal skill. You don't want to use that at the start of a fight. and swapping weapons. But if you start in your longbow, right, because that's how you usually start fights, from range, and then you swap to greatsword to get the fury, well then you can't use your longbow for the burst anymore. So it just kind of is more convenient to have Moa stance to give you your first stack of fury, and then from there it doesn't really matter because you have permanent fury as soon as you get your first fury. But it just makes it so that you can start in your longbow and you just immediately have that fury for that extra ferocity and crit, and you don't need to like jump through any hoops to get that fury uptime, and your burst just starts rolling out immediately. So yeah, Moa stance really good, gives you your fury, and it gives you protection, which is really important, and it gives you extra boon duration. So you pretty much want to use Moa stance off cooldown. There's really not many situations where you want to save it. You can min-max the uptime of it, though, by waiting a little bit more before, like, say you're going to swap weapons, and then you know that you've got your agility proc there, so you can get the Moa stance, and then you immediately swap into like greatsword, and that'll give you the quickness there. But just in general, you're proccing so many boons all the time that you'll get value from Moa stance by just using it off cooldown, which means you're going to get the cooldown back sooner. So yeah, it's just better to use it off cooldown usually. So next is Protect Me. So Protect Me is a stun break for you and nearby allies, and it'll also give you 4,000 barrier, which is really strong, and 6 seconds of protection because of your boon duration, and regen and swiftness because it's a command. So it's mostly just useful for the barrier and protection, and the stun break. It's just a very defensive skill on a very low cooldown of 24 seconds because of the resounding timber trait. So really strong defense, and it's one of your 2 protection application skills, and you want to use them obviously to kind of extend their duration later on with your fury and stuff like that. So if you just use all of your skills at the same time and you suspect that you won't get like pressured or you'll need a stun break, it's actually kind of like optimal to do that, right? So you can use Moa stance and Protect Me. Actually, you want to use Moa stance first. So what you'll do is you'll do like Moa stance, Protect Me, and then the Quickening Zephyr, and that'll extend all of your boon durations. And yeah, it's just a lot of boons. You can keep them rolling through, and as you can see here, yeah, the protection uptime is pretty high, and you can keep it going, and by the time the protection runs out, those skills are already coming off cooldown. So yeah, it's just really strong for the sustain of the build to have that much protection and regen. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You have 2 stun breaks. Quickening Zephyr is usually what you won't be using as a stun break, so I like to save Protect Me as a stun break. So you gotta have to decide whether you want to use Quickening Zephyr offensively or defensively, depending on your situation, but I usually use it offensively, so I pretty much only have 1 stun break on this build. But yeah, that's